Happiness. Everybody wants to be happy, right? We're going to learn a lot of mystical secrets and a lot of Kabbalah. And it's all going to be grounded. And it's all going to be translated into everyday life. And you really will leave here with powerful information, I think. If not, you get your money back. Okay? Deal? So everything is rooted in the Torah. We're going to start off with taking a look at a specific verse in the weekly Torah portion. And we're going to, from that verse, we're going to kind of develop into a broader perspective on the Parsha. And there seem to be a number of things which have to be understood. There are things that are going to be, like they're begging to be understood. And I'm going to show you how this is explained from the mystical, Kabbalistic perspective. And develop that idea. And then we're going to bring it down home. Bring it back down to the ground, so we'll bring the house down, so to speak. So we're going to start off in the beginning of a fascinating biblical narrative. The world's first documented love story. It's not so romantic, though. It sounds like a very controlling parentage situation. The third reading of Parshas Chayei, make that the second reading. Third reading opens with the servant of Avram Avinu, Abraham's servant, responding to the instructions that he got. He got very specific instructions. Abraham called and he said, listen, I need you to find a good match for my son. He's only 40 years old. He's an eligible bachelor. There's a child bride waiting somewhere across the steppes and across the desert. I want you to go back to my home. I guess northern Iraq or Kurdistan today. And there, I want you to find a young girl who was born to one of my relatives. Avram Avinu seems to know exactly what he's talking about, but he doesn't really, because he doesn't know her name or who she's born to. And then you bring her back, and she will marry Yitzchak. And the servant is like, what if she doesn't want to come? He says, no, this is not an option. Failure is not an option. You have to succeed. All of my resources are available to you, and you have to take an oath. And so Eliezer, Eved Avram, dutifully takes an oath. And I want you to take a look in the beginning of the third reading, which is chapter 24 of Genesis, the 10th verse. We now hear of Eliezer, the servant of Avram Avinu, setting off on this very important and historic mission. And it starts off with camels. He started by taking 10 camels. They were his master's camels. And then he went. And then the Torah stops you and says, 1 second. He didn't just take 10 camels and go. V'chol tuv adonav biyodo. And everything his master had was in hand. Vayokom vayelach. And thusly armed, he rose up and went. So the obvious question is, how much can you fit into somebody's palm? How did he have everything Avram had in his hand? And why would he go traveling with the couch and the kitchen sink? Even if he could fit it into his hand. What's going on here? So the Sefarno says that it's not to be taken literally. Vayikach ha'eved, the servant took 10 camels. First he got permission. Boss, can I take all the SUVs? Go right ahead. Do as you must. And after he fills, so to speak, with camels, or gathers the camels, it says, V'chol tuv adonav biyodai. Says the Sefarno, V'notal imoi kli chesef, v'chli zohov, ubegadim. Took gold, he took silver, he took wardrobe, valuables. And this he didn't need to ask permission already, because it was clear to him at this point that Abraham had given him free rein. Do as you must. You do as you understand. You have a mission to accomplish, go get the job done. So when it says, according to the Sefarno and the Chizkuni and many others, V'chol tov adonav biyodei, all of the goodness of his master in hand, first of all, it wasn't his hand. Second of all, it wasn't all of the goodness. It was expensive things on the camels. He loaded up the camels with expensive things. There's one little problem. That's not what the scripture says, but otherwise it's a great idea. So you could say, well, the scripture uses figures of speech. In hand means it's available. On the camels is available enough. Nachmanides, Ramban, he says that the words Vayikach es kol tuv biyodai means that Eliezer was given free rein. That's what it means. Chol tuv adoniv biyodai, Avram didn't tell him how to do this. He said, I trust you. I gave you a mission. Figure it out. Do not come back and ask me any questions. No expenses spared. You have an open bank account. Do whatever it takes. Bring the girl back. Doesn't sound so romantic, by the way, but that's what he says. Bring her back, no matter how expensive it's going to be. You figure it out. Ramban himself says, well, that doesn't exactly fit with the words. It says, V'chol tuv b'yodai. You're saying, V'chol reshut b'yodo. Not all the goodness, but all the permission to take goodness. So therefore, Ramban gives us an interpretation similar to the Sefarno, and he says, he took 10 camels worth. That was like taking 10 vans worth. He loaded up the camels with all kinds of wonderful things. He said everything Abraham had, he took the best of. So if he had gold, he took the finest gold. He had silver, he took the finest silver. He had silks, he took the finest of the silks. Whatever Abraham had, a specimen of everything. All of Abraham's residuals were represented here. And that's the meaning of biyadei. Lakhoy masa hagmalim. He took it all in hand. He loaded up the camels, and this was all brought as a gift, or bribe, or price. The price is right, whatever it's going to be. So Rashi has a problem with all this. And Rashi's problem is obvious because Rashi's job is to explain the Torah to us in its most literal iteration, and we have to follow the words, and we cannot simply ignore the fact that the Torah chose to use certain verbiage. Midrash is real, and it's true, and it's correct, but there has to simply be a straightforward, simple meaning. So what is the straight and simple meaning? So Rashi says that the meaning of V'chol tuv adoniv b'yodei means Shtar matona kosov, that Avraham Avinu had a document drawn up, a transfer of residuals, all his residuals, everything. Everything was transferred leYitzchak al kol asher loy. Avraham Avinu did not own the socks he was wearing, assuming he wore socks. He didn't own anything. Whatever he owned had now been given to Yitzchak. He was living in Yitzchak's house. He was wearing Yitzchak's clothes. It was Yitzchak's bank account. Nothing was left in the residuals of Avraham. And why did he do this? So people should get really excited and hear that Yitzchak is the sole heir of such a wealthy person that they would be happy to send their daughter off to date and marry Yitzchak. Okay, so that sounds very literal, and that's V'chol tuv biyodei. He had a document in hand that showed that Yitzchak was the rightful owner of all of Abraham's wealth. So, on the last Parshas Chayesara that the Rebbe was speaking to us, still speaking to us before he fell ill, the Rebbe asked what he used to call a klutz kasha. A klutz kasha is like one of these obnoxious technical questions that nobody ever asked before, because it's obnoxious, but it's still a question. It has to be dealt with. The Rebbe said Avraham Avinu was a smart man, and he was a halachic man. He did everything the way it should be done, and he did things prudently. Is it prudent to give everything you own to your children? It's not prudent. It's not a prudent thing. Even if you trust your kids, it's not a good idea to give your socks away.
He did an estate freeze.
He didn't do an estate freeze. He did a full transfer. A full transfer means he owned nothing. Why would you do that for? The Rebbe points out it's not halachic and it's not prudent. It's not halachic because the Rambam, in the end of the laws of Arachin and Charamim, says, and I quote, La'olam la'yakdish adam v'la'yachrim kol nechasav. A person should never dedicate all of their residuals, even to tzedakah. Forget to your own child. Don't give it all away. Bad idea. And we know this because the scripture says it. It says, Mikol asher loy, v'loy kol asher loy. Give away from everything you have. Don't give everything you have away. It's just not halachic. So Avraham is a halachic Jew. Why would he give everything away? It's question number one. And question number two, he's a prudent man. And as a prudent man, Avraham Avinu knew there's a good chance he's going to keep living. He was in perfect health. By the way, what's the problem? Prudent? Smart, careful. Just don't take chances. Like most of us are. We're pretty prudent. We don't live on the edge. Only the lion trainers put their head inside the lion and check out the insides. Most of us say, it's okay. I'll watch that happen. I'm not putting my head in there. Right? It's just prudent. So Avraham Avinu here is 140 years old. Anybody know how old he was when he passed? 175. That means he's got 35 years left. Now, he might live another course. He might live 35 days, 35 months, or 35 years. In fact, he lives 35 years. Now, that means that Avraham Avinu, for the last 35 years of his life, lived at the mercy of his son. It's not such a good idea. Well, you say, he wanted to make sure people want to marry Yitzchak. So if Yitzchak had $4 billion, not $5 billion, they wouldn't want to marry him? There's a ridiculous story they tell of a girl who married a very wealthy boy after his father left him a lot of money. And he's starting to think that maybe she doesn't love me. Maybe she just married me for my money. So he says to her one day, he says, tell me, honey, if my father hadn't died and left me $25 million, would you still marry me? And she said, honey, I don't care who left you $25 million. I'd still marry you, regardless how you got the money. So what if Avraham Avinu didn't give everything away? What if he gave 90% of his residuals away? What if he gave 80%? He was a very wealthy man. He was so wealthy that people treated him like an NGO. He was almost like a little government. Kings came and negotiated with him. He was way up there. This is the Forbes 500 on steroids. So if he was very wealthy and he wanted Yitzchak to be an eligible bachelor, a suitor that people would seek out, give him a lot of money. Give him a significant chunk of the money. Give him half the money. Give him 3/4 of the money. Don't give all your money away. Avraham did what we would call in English going for broke. What did he do that for? Now this is an obnoxious question. Why did he do it? He did it. Okay, but why did he do it? And the point of asking this question is, it seems, because the question is a question, it seems that we're missing a piece of the puzzle. And when we'd have maybe a bigger perspective or a larger or clearer picture, this question would fall away. So we're going to try to seek out the bigger picture. And you'll see, once this bigger picture is introduced, the klutz kasha just dissipates. We never even have to deal with it. But let me ask you, since we're talking about the klutz kashas, let me ask you another klutz kasha. Just another obnoxious, silly question. You know what a klutz is? Yeah. Somebody who walks into a wall. It's like, what are you doing? There's a shlomazel and a shlemiel. You know what the difference is? Shlomazel is Yiddish, but it comes from Hebrew. Shalom mazel, he has no good fortune. Shlemiel, he's a shlemiel. He's got 2 left hands. Or if you're a lefty, 2 right hands. Okay. So they say the difference between a shlemiel and a shlomazel, the shlemiel spills the soup on the shlomazel's lap. Okay? So these are klutz. So here's another klutz kasha. Making matches is a very old business. It's an old business. And it's not an easy business. It's not easy to find a shidduch. 2 people who come from very different backgrounds, very different realities, and they're all each supposed to transcend where they came from and make compromises and now enter into a new reality and create a new home together. It's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. It's so difficult that Talmud metaphorizes and says it's as difficult as as splitting the sea. Now, we don't try to split the sea. It wouldn't help us if we tried. But we do try to make shidduchim. It's a difficult thing. It's hard for it to work. It's a $1 billion industry, trying to make matches and then trying to save the matches after they're made. And this is how it goes. I had an aunt who was working with young ladies in Israel many years ago, and I remember my mother and she would correspond with, remember those old-fashioned air letters? The letter was the envelope. Yeah. Somebody has this childhood memory, this airmail. And my mother gets a letter from her sister-in-law, from my aunt, and she writes, I spend my days trying to find matches for the girls I teach. I spend my night trying to comfort the ones who are already married. So it's difficult to make a shidduch. So when we want to make a shidduch, if you want to make a match, what would you look for? What would you look for? Say, okay, you seem to be on one extreme, and you seem to be on the other extreme. This is a perfect shidduch. Said no one ever. Said no one ever. Because we try to find commonality, common ground. Years ago, I read a little vignette where a kid from the 60s tells his Zaidi, I think I found the right one. And his Zaidi says to him, he says, Jake, I met her. You guys have nothing in common. And little Jake says, Grandpops, you don't understand. Opposites attract. And Zaidi says, Jake, a man and a woman are opposite enough already. We don't look for greater disparities. We look for things that they share together. Yitzchak is born in Israel, and he's raised in Israel. His father is a super tzaddik. His mother is a super tzidkonis. The most righteous man and woman on planet Earth. That's who he's given, that's who he's born to, and that's who he's raised by. He had a not-so-good half-brother in the house, and that boy got the boot very swiftly. So he grew up in a controlled environment. He didn't hear evil, he didn't see evil, because if there was any evil, his mother got rid of it very quickly. She kept the environment sterile and clean. All he saw was kindness, all he saw was hospitality, all he saw was openness. And everything was doused in monotheism and God consciousness. That's Yitzchak Avinu. As he goes older, he becomes so committed to God that when his father gets a command to bring him as an offering, he says, Amen. Because at some point he realizes what's going on. He's not a child. He's not being forced. He's 37. His father's 137. Yitzchak says, Amen. I'm totally committed to your mission. Rivka is born to a father who's an idolater and a thug. How do I know he's a thug? I know he's an idolater because Rivka says, you can come into the house now. Why does she have to say you can come into the house? I cleaned it out. From what? Rivka understood that Eliezer, the servant of Avram, wouldn't come into a house that was full of idols. So Rivka had to clean the house from idols. So she lived in a house filled with idols, number one. Number two, it starts off a negotiation with Rivka's father, but later on, Rivka's brother's there. So what happened to Rivka's father? Oh, he died. How did he die? Oh, the Medrash tells us, you see, he took one look at this Eliezer guy, and he took a look at his 10 camels, and he took a look at all of the material on the camels, and he said a little cyanide should do the trick. He said, let's have lunch. Eliezer said, well, I got to speak first. First I speak, then we eat. In the meantime, miraculously, some angels switched the plates. Besuel ate his own cyanide, and now he's left negotiating with Lavan. So what do we know about Rivka's father? He's a thug. Not just any thug. He's a thug who's ready to kill somebody to steal his money. That's her father. Probably her father and mother were a good shidduch. We don't read of any disputes between them. And the mother doesn't seem very eager to send Rivka away. She seems extremely reticent. It's not as if she was on a different page with her father. Rivka's brother, he is the grand chief of larceny. He's the biggest thief you ever met in your life. He's a swindler from head to toe. If you read the stories of the wedding that he arranged for Yaakov, he stole everybody's coats. This guy was unbelievable. He was as crooked as they come. So Rivka's born in a house with idols, with a father who's a murderer, a brother who's a thief, and a mother who's, comfortable with everybody around her. And she's born in a rock. Okay? And she's never heard or seen of a tzaddik in her life. Natural shidduch, no? So, they share the same genes. Okay, forget that, it's not even so healthy. But maybe that happened later on. What was Avram thinking? You have Einer, Eshkol, and Mamre, 3 brothers. These 3 brothers are called Baalei Brit Avraham. They were in Avram's court from day one. They supported Avram. When Avram went to war, they didn't say, Avram, what are you doing? They said, we're going to be the home National Guard. We're going to take care of you. You do what you got to do. We're behind you. When Avram Avinu didn't know what he should do, make a bris, Mamre said, God told you. Has he abandoned you yet? You listen to God. These are people who are basically bathed in monotheism. They're living in Avram's shadow. Eliezer, Eved Avram, is so loyal to Avram Avinu that he isn't Jewish, but he's right up there in the pantheon of Jewish heroes. He shows up as some of the most powerful prayers and greatest acts of devotion, and he really, by and large, is the first shliach, the first agent. Avram trusts him implicitly. He gives him full right to take whatever he wants. He gives him an open bank account. Sign checks. Do as you please. Avram trusts him, and he had a daughter. And he was desperate to make a shidduch with Avram. Avram says, nope, nothing doing. Not Einar, not Eshkol, not Mamre, definitely not you. Instead, my son Yitzchak, born in Israel, raised in a house of monotheistic commitment and devotion and faith, never saw an idol in his life. Yishmael got the boot right away. His mother cleaned a sterile environment. He's going to marry this girl who grew up in the polar opposite kind of home. Why? Because they share a common ancestor. Because 4 generations ago, they had the same idolatrous grandfather. Does this make any sense to you? And this is the paradigm of the first shidduch. It doesn't make sense. Another thing that doesn't make sense about this parsha, this is not my question now, just a general question, is that this parsha is very long. It's very long. And it doesn't have that much information in it. In fact, the entire story is repeated just about twice, with slight nuances. So we know that Eliezer was clever. So we know that he knew what to switch in the story, and he knew how to negotiate. Well, whoopee-doo. Suppose you wouldn't know that Eliezer was so clever. How much less wise would you be? How much less Jewish would you be if you didn't know how clever Eliezer was, the servant of Avram? We have none of his children amongst us. We don't know anything else about him. He's disappeared about 37 centuries ago. Really, who cares? Why couldn't you just say in one verse, Vayisaper lahem Eliezer kechol advarim ha'ela? It's one verse. Eliezer said, let me tell you what happened. Or, you'll never believe what happened. And that's what he said. Instead, he repeats the whole thing a second time. So this isn't my question. This question is actually commented on by the Medrash Rabbah itself. The Medrash Rabbah, when we come to the verse that says, they gave fodder to the camels, and then Eliezer, they wanted to serve him lunch, and he said, what? Not yet. First I must speak. I have a speech to give. That's nice. So we could just say, and he told them what happened. But it doesn't. The whole story is repeated with all of its niggling and ridiculous details. He saw her, and he asked for a drink, and she tipped her pitcher, and then afterwards the camels drank, and then she said, come and sleep, and come into the house, and we have room for you. What difference does it make? I gave her a bracelet before or after. Says the Medrash, Omer Rabbi Acha, the great sage Rabbi Acha taught, with regard to Eliezer's choosing to repeat the entirety of the story, and the Torah repeating it verbatim, word for word. We see from here, Yofa Sichoson Shalav de Avos, that in Hashem's eyes, it's more beautiful to talk about the common conversation, the casual conversation of the servants of the patriarchs. It's not a halacha. In fact, we don't learn any halachas from here. But it's more important to talk about this miteiras and shalbanim than the Torah of the children, where the Torah was given to the children. And we're even talking about halacha, which really is the essence of Torah, because halacha is what we're supposed to do. So here's God's instructions. Here's what you should do. 630 mitzvahs. How do I do them? Here's the halachas. Parshasei shel Eliezer, the portion of Eliezer, Shnayim v'shloisha dafim, takes up 2-3 pages. Hu oimra, he says it, v'shoina, and then he repeats himself a second time. However, the Rabbi Acha said, when it comes to the particular halacha about a rodent, which is called a sheretz, there are 8 rodents whose carcasses communicate or engender ritual impurity. We, the Jewish people who observe Torah mitzvahs today, aren't actually mindful of this because we don't live under the regiment of purity or impurity. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash. We don't have the things that require ritual purity and impurity. We've all been to a funeral. None of us are really in a state of ritual purity. It isn't relevant for us, unfortunately. It's a big portion of the Torah which we're not able to keep and observe today. But for many centuries, this was a key part of being an observant Jew. So the sheretz, it communicates ritual impurity. And that's migufi ha-Torah. That's the body of Torah itself. Torah means instruction. It's telling you how to live. If you touch the sheretz, you must do such and such, or don't come to the Beit HaMikdash, or don't eat truma. And the Medrash says, The ein domo mitaha mitame kibsaro. The sheretz is talked about in the Torah. However, the notion that its plasma would also make you ritually impure, I know this is kind of sickening, but it's a halacha, we don't see that openly in the Torah. So does it? Do the fluids excreted by the carcass of this dead animal make you ritually impure, or that's just fluids? We don't know. So we learn it. How do we learn? We learn it miribui. We learn it from the fact that the Torah, when it communicates this halacha to us, we have an unusual or seemingly superfluous way of telling us about it. And we have a dispute about this. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, it could have said, it says, V'zelacham hatomei. This is the ritually impure. It could have said, V'zelacham tomei. This is ritually impure. Instead it says hatomei. So since it could have said hatomei, it says tomei, and it says hatomei, which means an extra hey, the. So that tells you to include also the blood. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yosi says, it could have said zeh, this. Instead it says vizeh. What's vizeh? An extra vav. An extra vav is like and. So it could have said, instead of the, there's an and, which is not a whole word, it's just one letter. But it doesn't say zeh, it says vizeh. So from this you derive a halacha. Rav Acha's point is this. Here we have rules by which we're supposed to live our lives. They have rules. This is what you're supposed to do. The Torah should tell us what it expects of us. It should tell it to us clearly, explicitly. It doesn't always. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And yet when it comes to the story of Eliezer, we have to hear the whole story over. It's part of the Torah. What's going on here? So Rabbi Acha touches on the question, but can you please tell me what his answer is? Yafa sichasan. That speech that Eliezer made, that story he told was so beautiful. Pass the tissues. That's a beautiful story. It's such a romantic story. Camels came, they needed water, the camels kneeled, they didn't know what to do, he began to pray. A young girl came out, she never usually went, and today she did go. Oh, do I give a hoot from why do you have to repeat the story again? No, you see, the Torah wanted to repeat the story. I know the Torah wanted it, the Torah did it. And there's actual bodies of the Torah, portions of the Torah, halacha of the Torah. The Torah doesn't say anything. It just alludes to it. It gives you an extra hey, an extra vav, an and, or a the. Why? Why? Well, the Medrash doesn't really answer the question. And the Yalkut Shimoni talks about the same thing. It doesn't do much more for us. The Yalkut Shimoni doesn't even say Amar Rebacha. He just makes a statement. It's more beautiful because the parsha of Eliezer is Shnayim v'shloisha dafim. V'hasheretz ve'ein domi mitame kibsarei miribui hamikra. That's all. That's all you get. So the same teaching, shortened version of it, and we are left wondering, what in heaven is going on here? Why would you bother telling us the whole story when entire halachas are seemingly only derived from a superfluous letter in the Torah? Just for heaven's sake, say what you want. I want what you say. So this is a big question, and this is the question that we're asking today. And this has to be understood. Now, you should know, as a matter of fact, that there are some questions in Torah which don't really have a good answer outside of the esoteric discipline. There are some questions in Torah which, there are statements, question. Not every question in Torah has an answer in pshat. Not every question has an answer in remez, in things you can allude to, or even in a drush and homily. There are some parts of the Torah that can only be fully and properly understood by leaning on the mystical meaning of those words. And I would like to suggest to you this is one of those questions, or one of those issues in Torah, which without the mystical perspective, you'll always come up short. It'll never really give you a satisfying feeling. It's always going to still be wondering. Okay, fine. So Yafa Sichasan. Well, why? Okay. So we're going to learn now some Kabbalah together. A lot of Kabbalah, in fact. And I'm going to share with you the Kabbalistic answer that's given, which is primarily, it originates in the writings of the Arizal, teachings of the Arizal. And the Zohar itself does not give this answer. The Arizal talks about this. And this particular manuscript of the Arizal, which is only found in 2 places in the writings of the Arizal, very, very cryptically, and not even as an answer to the question, is developed in the teachings of Chabad Hasidus at great length and really, really expounded upon. So we're going to take this Lurianic idea, expound upon it, and demonstrate how it answers our big question here with Rabbi Acha. And ultimately, once we have the question with Rabbi Acha answered and we understand the mystical and Kabbalistic terminology that this all represents, then we'll also understand how to find inner balance and happiness in our lives. But first, let's make the question just a little more difficult. Just a little more. Not that it really needs to be the incongruous nature of the shidduch doesn't need to be kind of emphasized. It's very obvious to anybody who's in the shidduch world that Yitzchak and Rivka were not exactly what you call a natural shidduch, at least not on the surface. Just doesn't seem to match. Like if you're looking for, okay, we need a shidduch. Great, open Parshas Chayesara. How'd they make a shidduch there? They found a girl who grew up in a totally different household with totally different ideals. That must be the right one. Do not try this at home. It's probably not going to work. Unless your name's Avram Avinu, and you have Rivka Imenu, and Yitzchak Avinu, not a good idea. So there's this notion that Yitzchak and Rivka are very different. They're very far apart. So I'm just going to make that, I'm going to thicken the broth a little. And show you how not only on a literal level were they far apart, but actually on a spiritual level, they were very far apart as well. They're totally different on a spiritual level, even though they're both very righteous. So you're going to say, well, Avraham Avinu, she's righteous. But I'm going to demonstrate to you now, from the teachings of Kabbalah, how spiritually you couldn't have found a greater opposite. 2 righteous people, but polar opposites. Let's talk about Yitzchak. What do we know about him? I know the answer is not very much, but what do we know about him? He looks like his father, but he has a different personality, okay? We know he looks like his father. It doesn't help us that much because we don't know what his father looked like, but he looked like his father, okay. What else do we know about him?
He likes to dig.
He likes to dig. We're going to find it out later. Next week's parsha will say he likes to dig. Good point. We don't know that about him yet. What do we know about Yitzchak? We know quite a bit about Abraham. We know quite a bit about Sarah. We know about Avram and Sarah's fights. We got to hear all about it. They had shalom bayis most of the time, except when they were fighting and issues and arguments, and God has to mix in a few times. He's their marriage counselor. So we know quite a bit about Avram Avinu. The narrative picks up when he's 75. We have midrashic interpretation before, but we have numerous scenes in which Avram Avinu is acting. We have already 2 parshiot, Lech Lecha and Vayera. So we know quite a bit about Avram, and up until this point, we even know that Avram is a very, very generous man, even when it comes to purchasing land, and he spends an enormous amount of money to actualize his dream and bury Sarah. We know a lot about Avram. What do we know about Yitzchak? Yeah, we know he's 40. Okay. We know he looks like his father and he's 40. This sounds like a license. 6 feet, 170 pounds, brown eyes. Thank you. Do you know anything else about him? He's from. How do you know that?
Well, they said that he was brought up in a household with Sarah, who kept him.
We presume he was brought up in a household with Sarah, and it seems that he was a very frum boy. It seems he's walking in the footsteps. What do we know about him? Tell me something about Yitzchak. Do we know anything about Yitzchak? Please, somebody tell me. Has the Torah ever told us anything about him? Yes, the Torah did tell us something about him. The Torah did. He does what his father tells him, but it's not just so simple. He does what his father tells him because he believes that that's what God told his father to do. So the only time Yitzchak gets a talking part, he doesn't talk very much. We don't really have him saying anything. We have him being born, we have everybody laughing around him, we have everybody happy. We don't have him saying anything. Do you ever hear the story of the little boy who came home and he said, Ma, I'm so excited. I got a part in the school play. And the mother said, oh, I'm so proud of you. That's great. What are you doing? He says, I'm going to be the husband. She says, oh, I wanted you to have a speaking part. He's a perfect husband, Yitzchak. He doesn't say anything. Does he speak at all? In the whole Torah, does he speak? He does speak.
He does
When his father is taking him to the Akedah.
Right.
All of a sudden, Yitzchak finds a voice. He's only 37. We haven't heard his voice yet. He says, Dad? That's the first words we get to hear from Yitzchak. Dad? Vayomer. And he said, quotation marks, Avi? Dad? Vayomer. And Avraham said, here I am, son. Hineni. And Yitzchak says, Dad? We got wood? Knife? Where's the beef? Who's the korban? Vayomer Avram. And Avram Avinu says, funny you should ask. Elokim yireh lehaseh la'oila b'ni. God will show us the lamb. And that's you. It's from God. Yitzchak doesn't say anything after it. That's it. That's all we get. That's the whole conversation. Later on, he finds his voice at the end. Now he's old and blind and he wants to give blessings. That's all he says. Dad? Yeah. Where's the beef? You're the beef. That's all. But Yitzchak speaks in a way that's much louder than words. How does Yitzchak speak? Vayelchu shnehem yachdov. What does Yitzchak say? What? Dad, are you out of your mind?
He obeys.
Vayelchu shnehem yachdov. The Kli Yakar interprets this conversation. He says, Yitzchak realized something's off here. My father's walking, he's got a knife in his hands. something is off. Maybe Dad lost it. You know, he is 137 years old. So Yitzchak decided to prod a little to see if he'll call out to his father. If the father looks at him like with eyes that don't recognize, with glassy eyes, or he responds lovingly. He says, Avi? My father? Doesn't say, my father? And Avram says, yes, darling son, yes, hineni, whatever you need. I'm here to do, I love you, whatever. Oh, Yitzchak says, so he isn't crazy. Okay, so then comes the question. If you aren't insane, and you actually know what you're doing, could you please explain it to me? And Avram says, yeah, I was waiting for you to ask that question. We're here because God told us to be here. Elikim yireh. This is God's idea. And what does Yitzchak say? Remember, Avram knows about this for 3 days already. What does Yitzchak say when he gets this news? He's just like a bombshell. His father just told him that God said, I should slaughter you. The Yitzchak say, Dad, are you sure your hearing aid was working that day? Can we do a double check on this? Maybe can we get in writing from God? At least you can send us an email or something? Just a confirmation? What does Yitzchak say? He says nothing. That's the most powerful words he could say. He sees his father walking with holy devotion. Yitzchak's walking with the same holy devotion. What does that tell us about Yitzchak? You know what it tells us about Yitzchak? He is the only one in history who was willing to be a korban. Avram was willing to make a korban, make an offering out of his son. Yitzchak was willing to be the offering. As hard as it is to make an offering, it's harder to be the offering. This is a terrible off-color joke. But what did the pig tell the chicken? He said, you make a contribution. I have to give myself. Not a Jewish joke, but you understand the message. Avraham Avinu's doing an act which is hard, which is difficult, which is painful. Yitzchak is ready to be an offering. This is unbelievable. In history, we don't have anything like this. Nobody came along and said, here I am. With pleasure, I'm ready to follow the will of Hashem. Do you know what Yitzchak is called? He's called an Ola Tamima. He's called a perfect offering, an ascent offering. Ola means to lift off. Now listen to this. I bet you never heard this. Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, the fascinating midrashim that were collected by Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, an amazing man who became religious when he was in his late teens. He was living in Israel. His father hated religion and hated the sages and hated the Torah. Sounds familiar? Not much has changed in 22 centuries. Anyway, Eliezer was unhappy. Something was missing in his life, and he becomes a disciple of the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. This goes back over 2,000 years ago. So this Rabbi Eliezer compiled phenomenal, fascinating midrashim, many of which are not found anywhere else. And he says, Rabbi Yehuda taught, Kivan shehigia hacherev al tzavore, when the knife reached the neck of Yitzchak, which we know that it did, Avram sent his hand forth. Says Rabbi Eliezer, Parcha v'yatza nishmasa shel Yitzchak. Yitzchak expired. In spiritual ecstasy, he expired. Maybe you call it a heart attack, I don't know. He expired, he died. Here's something fascinating. You know where else this teaching is found? For centuries, there was nowhere else where this was ever indicated. Centuries. Like 20 centuries. However, in the Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts, there is the story of the Akedah, written, interspersed with Medrashim, and this Medrash is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Pretty cool. So it says Yitzchak expired. Once they heard his voice amongst the Kruvim, which is like as a metaphor for the cherubs on heaven, and then the angels cried out to Avram, Al tishlach yodcha anar, don't touch the child. God said, no, stop right now. I didn't mean for you to kill him. I just wanted to see if you're ready to do it. Chazar nafshe legufrei. Yitzchak suddenly came back to life. The Medrash says he died. He expired. And what happened then? V'hitirei, he untied the cords that had bound him. V'amad al raglav, v'ra Yitzchak tchias hamesim minat Torah. Yitzchak saw that the resurrection is the real deal, because he actually experienced the resurrection. Don't ask me what this means. Thank God I never died. I never experienced resurrection. Yitzchak experienced the resurrection. Maybe this is what people call a near-death experience. I don't know. But I'm telling you what it says here. It says Yitzchak actually died. And it says, Ba'osei shah pasach. At that moment, he opened his mouth and he said, Baruch atah Hashem, mechayeh hametim. Now, if you remember the class 2 weeks ago, we said when God told Avram, Anochi magen lach, what did the angel say? Baruch atah Hashem, magen Avraham. Okay, that was the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei. Now we're at the second blessing of the Shemona Esrei. Yitzchak comes back to life, and what did he say? He actually thanked God. Baruch atah Hashem, mechayeh hamesim. Do you know that the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei, called Avot, corresponds to Avram Avinu, Magen Avram. And the second blessing of the Shemona Esrei corresponds to Yitzchak. It's called Gvurot. It corresponds to Yitzchak. So Yitzchak experienced the resurrection. Now let me tell you what the Zohar says about this. The Zohar says that at the moment this happened, this is a Zohar, it's found at the beginning of Parshas Noach, it's the codicil printed along with the Zohar on page 60, called Tosefta. It says, Beshaita, the Iskarav al Gabe Midbacha, at the time when Yitzchak was brought onto the Mizbech, Nafkis Nishmasei, his soul left him. The Havas Beba Hayalma, he was already in the other world. He's already in the other world. The Kevon, the Itmar Be Avram, and once Avram saw this happen, Baruch Mechaya HaMesim, he said Baruch Mechaya HaMesim, Tove Ben Ishmasil Almadasi. A new neshama came down into this world. And the Zohar goes on to say that this was a different soul than he had to begin with. Different soul? He had an upgrade. He had an upgrade. So as holy as you think Yitzchak was before, now he's even holier. This man is the holy of the holies. Okay, he was brought into this world by Avram and Sarah, the first person to be born a Jew, and he's the first born again Jew. But not like that. Like in a holy way. Whatever he had, however good his neshama was, now he got a new infusion of neshama. Could you think of a holier soul? This man is in the clouds. This man is in the highest rungs of holiness. And how about Rivka? So Rivka, by the way, before I go further, I just want to tell you that it says about Yitzchak that part of his elevation was, it says that Avram put him me'alla eitzim, on top of the wood. This is what the Mendel says. So the Tzemach Tzedek in the Drush says, me'alla eitzim means that these eitzim, eitz is wood, and eitzim are plural, two woods. What's the two woods? Eitz Chaim and Eitz Hadas. That's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. Yitzchak went higher than the tree of life and tree of knowledge. If you look at the Zohar in Parsha Shlach, It says Moshe Rabbeinu told them, check out the land. See im yesh ba eitz im ayin. See if there's wood or not. So the Zohar says, would you give me a break? What do you mean as if there's wood? Moshe didn't know there's wood there? What do you think? There was a barren land? He himself told the Jewish people it's a beautiful land, that it's verdant, and it's green, and flows with milk and honey. And now he doesn't know if there's trees growing there? So the Zohar says this means on something on a very deep level. It means, see if the land is higher than Eitz Hadas and Eitz HaChaim. See if it's the level of Ayin. Ayin is the level of the highest level of nullification, where it's like beyond reality. It's so beyond reality that it looks like nothing, because Ayin means nothing. It's not even discernible as an independent reality from God. What we can see from the Zohar is that Ayin is the highest level of non-being. Total submission, total subservience, melting into godliness. This is Yitzchak. How about Rivka? So about Rivka, it says in the writings of the Arizal that she's called the level of neshama called Reish L'Shualim, which means the head of the foxes. What does this mean? So there's this proverbial discussion in the Mishnah about if it's better to be the head of the foxes or the tail of the lion. The lion is supposed to be the king of the jungle, and the fox is the clever guy running between everybody's feet on the back. Should you be a head, a locomotive, or a caboose? So Rivka is called the head of the caboose, the head of the end of the train, Rosh of the Shualim. And it says that she is Aim, Yaakov, and Esav. And that Tzemach Tzedek quotes the Medrash saying, do you know why there's camels in the story? Did you notice that there's camels here? It takes 10 camels, and the camels have to go up, and the camels have to go down. For heaven's sake, what do I have to hear about camels for? So the Medrash says, because the camel is one of the animals that has one kosher sign, not two kosher signs. The camel ruminates. It chews its cud, but it does not have split hooves. And Rivka contained two possibilities. She is the aim of Yaakov, and she is the aim of Esav. She is the mother of one of the greatest tzaddikim of all time, and the mother of one of the most wicked and evil people of all time. Esau is the progenitor of Amalek and Nazism, and Yaakov is the progenitor of the Jewish people and Mashiach. And Rivka contained both. She had both possibilities within her. You still think it's a good shidduch? Forget materially. Even if you want to be a spiritualist with your head in the clouds, if you are a Kabbalist and you take a look at these neshamas and say, okay, this neshama is a oila tamima, this neshama is a ayin, he's a ayah on top of the eights, he's beyond eitz chaim, he's a das. Whatever holy neshama he had to get a new neshama after, he's a oila tamima, he can never leave Israel. You know that. Yitzchak was so holy, he wasn't allowed to leave Israel. It was a famine. He wanted to leave, go down to Egypt, like his father said. No, Gurbar says, you must stay in Israel. Yitzchak is so holy, he can't leave the Holy Land. Rivka's not even born in the Holy Land. She's born in the polar opposite of the Holy Land. It's the capital of idolatry, where she's born. And she grows up in a house of idolatry. It's an impossible shidduch here. Doesn't seem to make any sense. What was Avram thinking? What do we learn from this? Okay. So, now we're going to learn some Kabbalah. Everybody knows what the name of God is? The name of God? And he has many names. The ineffable name of God. What's called the tetragram. The name of God that we're not allowed to pronounce. Yes? No? You don't know it? I don't really know it either. Nobody knows how to say it, actually. It says the Kohen Gadol would say it when they were in the Beit HaMikdash on Yom Kippur, and the people, the Kohanim, would hear the name of Hashem. They would fall flat on their faces. They were knocked over, bowled over by the energy that was generated from the Kohen Gadol's explicit pronunciation of that name. Very powerful thing. It says this name was so holy and so profound, they would teach it once every 7 years. The Kohanim would get a secret lesson, and when the Kohanim would bless the Jewish people, they would sing and warble, and they would mix in the name somewhere nobody should be able to hear it. So this name of God is spelled with 4 Hebrew letters. A Yud, a Vav, and that's followed by, a Yud, a Hey, followed by a Vav and a Hey. We mispronounce it purposely as Havaya, putting the Hey in the front and the Yud at the end. We say Havaya. interspersing the Hey and the Yud. But Havaya is a name that we don't know how to pronounce properly. And the name of Havaya is the name of God. That's the primary name of God. Now, Yud K Vav K can be spelled out in 4 different ways. 4 different ways. How could you spell the letter Yud? The letter Yud could be spelled Yud Vav Dalet. Yud. Yud Vav Dalet. If you spell Yud, Yud Vav Dalet, what's the numeric equivalent of that letter going to be? Yud itself is 10. If you spell Yud, Yud Vav Dalet, what's the numeric equivalent? The numeric equivalent is going to be 20. Because Yud is 10, Dalet is 4, and 6. And 4 and 6 is 10, so 4 and 6 is 10, plus 10 is 20. Okay. Now how about the letter Hey? The Hebrew letter Hey. Not Hey You. The Hebrew letter Hey. How do you spell it? There's different ways to spell it. You can spell it Hey Aleph. You can spell it Hey Hey. You can spell it Hey Yud Yud. And the same is true with Vav. You could spell Vav, 2 Vavs. You could spell Vav Yud Vav. You could spell Vav Aleph Vav. Why am I telling this to you? Dickens difference does it make? So, the Hebrew letters each contain certain spiritual energy. They're all codes. Just like you understand H2O is a code. It represents the chemical makeup, the notion of the quantum physics of what water is. So all of the Hebrew letters have this powerful energy about them. And each one of the Hebrew letters represents something. And the gematria is not a game, it's not Scrabble. It actually represents divine energy. Sounds very distant to us, and we don't really know what that means, but then again, nobody knew what quantum physics was 100 years ago either. So it's a spiritual concept. And the spiritual concept is this. The name of God can be spelled in 4 different ways, because you can spell Yud K Vav K in 4 different ways. And when you spell it out in the smallest amount of Hebrew letters, it ends up spelling Yud K Vav K. You do the gematria, it ends up being 45. If you roll the dice again, you spell it slightly differently, it ends up being 52. Then you can roll the dice again, spell it with Yuds, and you could either end up with 63 or 72. Why am I telling this to you? I'll tell you why. Because according to the Kabbalah, there are 4 different names of Havaya. And the 4 different names, listen carefully, are called Ma, Ban, Av, Sag, Av. Ma is Mem Hey. Mem Hey. Mem is 40, Hey is 5. So the first letter of Yud Ke Vav Ke spells 45. That's called the Shem Ma. The Shem Ban is when you spell the name of God with the Heys. So you write Yud Vav Dalet, but instead of writing Hey Aleph, you write Hey Hey. Instead of writing Vav Aleph Vav, you write Vav Vav. And then instead of writing Hey Aleph, you write Hey Hey. So your numbers are slightly up. You lost an Aleph between the Vavs, but you got Heys instead of Alephs. Hey are 5, Aleph is 1. So you go from being Shem Ma, you go to being Shem Ban. Shem Ban is Beis Nun. Nun is 50, Beis is 2. You following? Then there's Shem Sag, Samach Gimel, 63. And then there's Shem Av. And Av spells 72. And the full iteration of God's name is the Shem Av. That's the full iteration. There is even an opinion that the full iteration of God's name has 72 characters in it. We're not going to focus on Sag and Av. We're going to focus on the first 2 names of God, because the first 2 names of God engender very different kind of realities. The name Yud Ke Vav Ke is connected to the concept of Haviyah, or bringing into existence. This is the divine energy with which God brings things into existence. And there's different forms of existence. There's Ma existence, and there's Ban existence. And Ma and Ban are not the same. Even though they're just a few numbers off, it's a totally different kind of reality. As you know, in chemistry, a few numbers here or there, a world of difference. So there's a world of difference between ma and between ban. So, broadly speaking, the shem ma represents the intellect or the concept of human rationale. The idea of Adam. The shem ma, by the way, has the gematria, same gematria as Adam. Adam is Adama, in the likeness of, represents higher consciousness. The shem ban, 52, has the same gematria as the word behema. Behema means an animal. An animal. You have a dog? You love your dog? I know a lot of people who love the dogs much more than they love their friends. The dog's a ball of emotion. He just loves you. It's an amazing little creature. There's much to be said for behema. Adam, without a behema, it's man and beast. It's human and beast. Adam without a behema is a sterile intellect. No feeling, no fervor, no passion, no compassion, no concern, no sensitivity. A robot. Nobody home. It's just rhyme and reason. It's just mathematics and arithmetic. Everything is logical. That's it. It's just academic. The behema is all emotion. He loves, he's excited, he gets angry. It's full of emotion. Can you reason with a dog? Okay. Can you reason with a cow? Can you reason with an animal? How are you going to reason with him? You give him love. You can't reason with him. Reason doesn't work. If you wanted to create the perfect reality, what would you have to do? You'd have to bring together ma and ban. When ma and ban come together, you have an intellect and a heart. You have rhyme and reason, and you have passion. And there's this notion in the Kabbalistic teaching, which is called the yichud, the unity, or unification, or bringing together of ma and ban. Ma and ban is a big deal. Let's just say this. Without ma and ban, nothing can exist. Nothing can happen without ma. If ma and ban can't get it together, nothing gets created. Because there needs to be intellect and there needs to be emotion. They are opposites. They are polar opposites. Because the intellect is cold and calculating. And the emotions are impetuous and seething. And it's like an impossible shidduch. You can't bring ma and ban together. Ma and ban have nothing in common. Well, actually, they have everything in common. On the surface, they have nothing in common. It's a tremendous tension between ma and ban. But when ma and ban can figure out how to get it together, amazing things can happen. By the way, ma and ban is Kabbalistic code terminology for masculine and feminine. Masculine neshamas are called neshamas de ma, and feminine neshamas are called neshamas de ban. How many women will say, my husband has no feelings, he has no sensitivity? It's like he's a doorknob. He can't speak to him. He doesn't talk. He doesn't feel. The husband will say, I don't know what my wife wants me. She's so emotional. She gets upset about everything. I'm just trying to have a logical conversation. This happens in every house all over Ontario. It's a very common thing. All over the world it's happening. It's called finding shalom bayis. It's not so easy. Yitzchak and Rivka, says the Arizal, are ma and ban. Ma and ban. This is the original coming together of ma and ban. Polar opposites. I shouldn't say the original. The original coming together of ma and ban is when the heavenly realities came together to engender creation. Because the world of Atzilut, which is the world of emanation, or the light or effulgence, if you will, metaphorically, that comes from God, had to engender a world. And that world came from masculine and feminine union, which resulted in the birth of reality. And that's why God created a physical man and a woman. When a physical man and woman get together, God blesses them, and what do they get? A baby. They create another human being. So ever since the beginning of creation, you need to have masculine and feminine coming together in order to create new life. That's the unique gift that God gave masculine and feminine, plus and minus, black and red, positive and negative, and all the other words you could use, that these two forces come together, and these forces, which are forces of attraction, but at the same time forces which attract and repel each other at once, when they come together, they have the power of fusion, which engenders new life. This is Yitzchak and Rivka. This is what Arizal says. So here is an excerpt of something the Alter Rebbe writes in the book of Likutei Torah, at the very end of Parshas Zeis HaBracha. He says, Avraham Avinu represented chesed. And Avraham Avinu represented abundant kindness, but kindness alone will not carry the day. He says, in the end, you need not just kindness, but discipline. And he says, discipline is more powerful than kindness. Because kindness left to its own devices can eventually go awry. But discipline makes sure everything goes right. And therefore he says, Mashiach won't come unless everybody does teshuvah. Not just they'll get filled with passion and fervor and jump up and down and say, I love you, God. They're going to rein themselves in. They're going to get themselves disciplined. They're going to regret what they did wrong, resolve to do differently in future. I'm going to get control of my life. When you get control of your life, that unleashes the powers of redemption. And the Alter Rebbe talks about this. And he says that's why it says Yitzchak Avinu, who is not understood today, he will be the real patriarch when Mashiach comes. We'll really appreciate because he was the master of discipline. And then the Alter Rebbe says, Yitzchak and Rivka are both from the same side. They're both from Gevura. They're both from discipline. But Yitzchak is Ma and Rivka is Ban. And Ma and Ban come together, and that engenders reality. Which this is a development of a Lurianic idea. Here, in a mimer that Alter Rebbe delivered in 1803, he's a little bit more explanatory. He goes back to this business with Rabbi Acha, and he says, Rabbi Acha says a whole story of why we have to have such great length. He says, but I don't understand. Why do we need such great length? Why do we have to repeat it twice? And he says, Hatam, the reason is because B'chol Torah, in all of the Torah, there is the presence of God. It says what he calls it Shora or Ein Sof Behelim. The light of God is there, but it's concealed. When many people look at the Torah, they don't see spirituality. So this is spirituality? Are you kidding? There's a book of laws. There's a book of stories. There's no spirituality here. I don't see revelation here. The rodent dies this way, he's impure. The rodent dies that way, he's not impure. What's spiritual about that? It doesn't seem spiritual at all. You look at halacha, so dry. Where's the spirituality? Where's the holiness? Where's the magic? How many Jewish kids say, I'm not looking for spirituality? Judaism has no spirituality yet. I want to find real spirituality. I'm going east. I'm going to climb the mountains. They're going to find spirituality. So the Alter Rebbe says in the Torah, the spirituality is there, the holiness is there, but it's behelim, it's concealed, it's camouflaged. But in the story of Eliezer, we hear about God's presence openly. Why? Eliezer sees miracles. And it says he kneels and he bows. He's overwhelmed. He says the presence of God over there is seen overtly, openly. In the stories that we read, we see the presence of God in an open way. And he says, but that doesn't really make sense. Where do you see the presence of God in the story of Eliezer? The well doesn't split open. He sees a girl. He asks her for some water. Okay, it was exactly the right girl at the right time. It's not that profound. It's not that exciting. So he says, this is because Davar Gadol, something very big is happening. Avraham Avinu understood when he sent Eliezer that he needed to do something that was going to be the foundation of the whole future of the Jewish people. Avraham Avinu, the great Kabbalist, knew that he needs to bring a neshama of Ban to a neshama of Ma. And Yitzchak is the holiest of neshamas. But guess what? From his abstraction and runaway holiness, you'll end up with nothing. He'll never have a baby. He'll never get married. Nobody will ever be able to discipline him. He'll be in the clouds. There will be no tomorrow. There will be no continuity. Avraham Avinu has a huge problem on his hands. If he's going to marry the daughter of Eliezer, she'll just be a subservient, dutiful wife. She's never going to stand in the lurch and say, Yitzchak, you're wrong. Forget about it. She was raised in awe of Avraham. She was raised in awe of Yitzchak. She would just be a submissive wife. It wouldn't work. Even Einel, Eshker, and Mamre, they grew up bathed in holiness. It would never work. You couldn't transform themselves. They would simply do whatever Yitzchak said. And there would be no Jewish people. Avraham Avinu says, I need to find somebody who's going to be the counterweight of Yitzchak. I need a spiritual equal, but also a counterweight of a spiritual equal. He's Ma, he needs Ban. He's in the clouds, he needs somebody on the ground. So Avraham Avinu is setting the stage for the future of the Jewish people, but really, this becomes a paradigm, or if you will, this becomes like a blueprint of what Judaism is about. Judaism is about Ma and Ban coming together. You understand what I'm saying? Is it making sense? You have to, if I'm not, you have to ask me if I'm losing you. It's very mystical, it's very Kabbalistic, but it actually makes sense. The Alter Rebbe says that that's why Yitzchak was so holy. We just learned about him. He was above the wood. He was disconnected. He was disconnected. And they need to have somebody who's going to be able to pull him down. By the way, if Yitzchak would have had his druthers, who would have got the blessings? Yaakov? Esau. Because Yitzchak was really impressed with Esau. He was so earthy. He was so down to earth. He took a look at Yaakov. He said, this guy is going to be eaten for lunch. How will he stand in the way of inquisitors and Nazis? How will he be able to stand up to Cossacks and Romans? They'll eat him for lunch. They'll never be a Jewish people if Yaakov gets the blessings. Esau, that's power, that's strength. He's going to defend the homeland. He's not so holy. We have to figure out how to make him holy. I got to keep digging. But this guy, he's got what it takes. Do you think Eliezer's wife, Eliezer's daughter, would have had the gumption to stand up to Yitzchak and say you're wrong? It was only Rivka who understood that Yitzchak was dead wrong. Who sets the course of the Jewish people in motion? Rivka does, not Yitzchak. Yitzchak catalyzes the process. Who makes it happen? Rivka. By the way, Rivka and Yitzchak are the paradigm of the future. It says that the paradigm of the past is Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah. Rachel and Leah were primarily submissive wives. They made some demands. They kvetched a little, but they didn't really tell Yaakov what to do. When Yaakov said, God said I have to go, they said, whatever God tells you. It says in the age before Mashiach, that's when you have the paradigm of Sarah and Avram. What do we know about Avram and Sarah's marriage? Besides that we're sure they had a great marriage. What do we know about, though? The scenes that we get to see in the Chumash. They're always arguing. There's like who's driving? Who's driving? Who's the car? Who's moving things along? Avram and Sarah. And in the end, God has to tell Avram, you listen to Sarah. But in the Yitzchak and Rivka paradigm, who calls all the shots? Rivka. That's it, a Kabbalist. When Mashiach comes in the Keva to save Gever, that's when the feminine move, not into equal portion, but that the feminine take over. The feminine dimension rises to the dominance in the time of Mashiach. This is Yitzchak and Rivka. This is the Gvura of Yitzchak and Rivka. This is the age which hasn't yet come. Only a Rivka, who comes from the same background, but is the polar opposite, is going to be able to, so to speak, tame or harness the energy that's Yitzchak. This is the Yichud of Ma and Ban. In the words of the Rebbe Rashab, who developed a very, very...
How do you spell Ma?
Ma Mem He. Very, very fascinating mimer that he delivered in the year 1900. I can't, it'll take like 3 hours to tell you everything it says here, but he develops this idea in phenomenal fashion. He says, first of all, you know that the concept of Tikkun Olam, which everybody talks about, but nobody knows what they're talking about, it's actually about there was a world of chaos. The world of chaos melted down. It's called the world of Tohu. And there was sparks or shrapnel, spiritual shrapnel that falls everywhere. And then came the world of Tikkun, the world of rectification. And our job is to find these sparks and restore them. The world of Tohu and the world of Tikkun. And he says, Ban is the energy of Tohu. Ma is the energy of Tikkun. Ban has incredible force and energy. But Ban needs to be harnessed by Ma. And Ma needs to be infused by Ban. So only when you have Tohu and Tikkun, with the words that the Rebbe used to describe how we should work hard to bring Mashiach, he said energy of Tohu in vessels or envelopes of Tikkun. Meaning make it sound reasonable, but it should be anything but. It should be passion-filled, fired-up engines in some kind of reasonable way being delivered. So the Rebbe says something very interesting. The Rebbe Rashab says, Yitzchak is a korban, right? And he goes into the whole idea of a korban. What is a korban? He says, a korban is a spiritual service. So what do you want from the animal? And he says, ultimately, the person bringing the korban is not able to melt into godliness. He's not able to experience a total sense of subservience. He could make a contribution. He could bring an offering. But the animal actually becomes the offering. He says the animal spirit is actually able to become at one, it's a korban ola, it rises up. It has much greater force. It has much greater, if you will, energy attached to it. And he says a very interesting thing. Nothing in this world is perfect. Everything needs rectification. Everything needs to be cleansed. Everything needs to be kind of sifted through. Everything in this world has desirable elements and undesirable elements. Everything. There's nothing in this world that's perfect. In fact, the most healthy food you eat still is filled with toxins. How do I know? Forget the plastic. He's saying healthy food. Healthy food. Actual, it's so organic it has ants in it, okay? You have to wash the ants off. It's totally organic. It's filled with toxins, things which your body cannot assimilate into it. What's the proof? Because if you wouldn't have intestines and you wouldn't have kidneys, you'd basically die. You'd be poisoned by the food you ate. So your body is working constantly at doing what? Cleansing. Separating the good from the bad and pushing out the bad and maintaining the good. Because there's only a very small amount of the food that can actually be absorbed into the bloodstream. And the rest of it, that's dreck. It's garbage. It's got to be pushed out of the body. That's the bad stuff. So, in the world of Ma, which is like the intellectual world, is there also bad stuff? Rebbe Shab says, yeah, there's bad stuff. You know, you have an idea. It's okay. There are too many ideas here. You need to filter out some of those ideas to get this idea to work. But it's not garbage. It's not garbage. But when you talk about the physical material, whether you're taking oil out of the ground and you have to burn off the toxins so you don't destroy the engine of the car, or whether you're talking about gold ore or silver ore that's taken out of the ground and you have to burn off all the toxins so you're left with pure gold, whatever it might be, you're taking out of the ground and refining it, the process of refinement, he says, there's a difference between spiritual refinement and physical refinement. Physical refinement produces actual garbage. Spiritual refinement produces, well, separation. You have to separate. You have to be able to know how to pick apart ideas, know which is good or bad, but it's not actual garbage. The world of Ma represents the concept of ideas. The world of Ban represents the concept of actions. In a mimer that the Rebbe delivered in 1982, 81 actually, he said something very, very interesting. He goes through much of what we spoke about in synoptic form, and he says, okay, practically speaking, what does this mean? Practically. In our own world. And I'll remind you that in the Sikha, in the edited talk that I started quoting from at the beginning of tonight's class from 1992, the Rebbe says there that the yichud of Ma and Ban takes place within each and every individual. Every person has Ma and Ban. Every person has Yitzchak and Rivka inside him. Every person has mind and heart, intellect and emotion. So the Rebbe says, in Avodas Ha'adam, in the service that we're supposed to bring before God, what represents Yitzchak? Which part of me is Yitzchak and which part of me is Rivka? So the Rebbe says the study of Torah is Yitzchak. The performance of mitzvahs is Rivka. Rivka represents the mundane, the earthy. You want to do a mitzvah? What do you need? Let's talk about mezuzahs. What do you need? You need parchment. Spiritual parchment, physical parchment. You want to eat matzah? It's a great idea. What do you need? You need wheat, physical wheat. You need physical water. You need a physical fire. All mitzvahs require physicality. Without materiality and corporeality and physicality, you can't do mitzvahs. What do you need to study Torah? A brain, consciousness. In theory, you could read a book, or listen to words, or even learn something and then think about it after and find something deeper in it. You don't need anything. So I want to share something interesting with you. If I tell you if I tell you that Judaism teaches that ordinary acts should be meaningful. Life should be meaningful. Meaning every ordinary act should have meaning in it. Sound reasonable? Do you think Judaism has the patent on that? Definitely not. I will tell you that every faith system says the same thing. In fact, even atheists will say the same thing. You don't even have to be religious for that. People will say a life of meaning. I want to live a meaningful life. People are craving meaning all over the place. Viktor Frankl's book is not filled with religious fervor. It's filled with the logic that a person needs meaning in life. Let me tell you what Judaism has a patent on, especially as what Hasidus teaches us. That ideals without action are worthless. This is not found elsewhere. People believe ideals. You want to be idealist? Be an idealist. Ideal. What's wrong with ideals? Person lives with ideals. When he's a hypocrite, that's a problem. You have ideals, and you're doing the opposite of your ideals. You believe in being charitable, and in fact, you don't share anything you have. Fine. So you're doing the opposite. Now you're a hypocrite. This is the great venial sin of Western civilization. Never do anything be called a hypocrite. But if I'm not doing anything hypocritical, I'm a spiritual person. I climb Mount Everest, and I feel spiritual. And I'm watching the sun rise or the sun set, and I feel spiritual. Okay, what's wrong with that? Judaism comes along and says that's nice. But it will be nicer when you take that fervor, that feeling, that sentiment, and translate it into action. In fact, we say, Hamaise hu ha'ikr. So have the Rebbe speak by a Farbrengen for an hour and develop the most deep ideas, and then he'll say, but all the things I taught you now are not going to have any value unless they become distilled into action. Because our sages tell us, Hamaise hu ha'ikr. That's fine. The intent of all the thought was that it should come into action. That's a Jewish idea. That's not found elsewhere. In other religious devotion, in other faith systems, in other philosophies, if you want to be a philosopher, if you want to be an idealist, that's great. It's beautiful. Just don't be a hypocrite. In Judaism, if all you have is philosophy and idealism, but it doesn't translate into actual deeds, it's worthless. It's worthless. Let me tell you the problem with Western civilization. Let me tell you why people aren't happy. The problem with Western civilization is that people choose one or the other. People think either I'm going to be an idealist and I'll be the poor artist because I'm idealist, and I don't have a bank account, and I'm not doing well, and my life's not together. But I'm an idealist. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying life. I'm living in a holy place. Or people are all about stuff. They have lots of stuff, and they're organized, and they're doing things. They have absolutely no idealism in life whatsoever. And both are unhappy, by the way. The artist is poor. He's unhappy. Of course he's unhappy. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have a roof over his head. He'd like to have a new pair of shoes. He can't afford it. He'd love to be able to eat well. He can't find the food. So he's not happy. If a person lives with deprivation, he's not going to be happy. That's the way God built us. Hungry stomachs do not equal happiness. Being cold, outside, without shelter, does not make you happy. I don't care how idealistic you are, you're still not going to be happy. The mendicant who lives on a park bench isn't really happy. He convinces himself he's happy. He's not happy. What do you think? He isn't jealous of the person who's well coiffed and well fed and comfortably sleeping? The person who has comfort, endless comfort. He has a beautiful place to sleep and beautiful clothes to wear. And he has beautiful friends and a beautiful home. And he committed suicide yesterday. It's happening every day in Western civilization. He said, what's wrong with these people? They have everything they could possibly want. We have more than people have ever had in human history. And there's one thing people don't have. Happiness. Why aren't they happy? If an empty stomach is not happy, then a full stomach must breed happiness. But for some reason it doesn't. If not having a roof over your head makes you unhappy, having a beautiful roof over your head must make you very happy. But it doesn't. And neither do likes on Facebook. How come? I have fame, I have fortune. I have money, I have comfort. I have friends, I think, kind of. I'm not happy. Why? Because they're collecting stuff. People go through life collecting stuff. They were told from the earliest age, just makes you happy. It'll make you happy if you just have more stuff. You just have to get more materialism. And then you'll be addicted to materialism. And you'll have endless material. And then you're going to be happy. And they're not. How come? Because the truth, my dear friends, is that happiness can only be achieved for a human being when a human being has both. You need meaning, you need purpose, and you need materialism. Because ma without ban is a disaster. Ma and ban have to come together. In our own lives, we need to find balance. Kabbalistically, I'm talking about ma and ban. In everyday reality, I'm talking about idealism, Torah, knowledge, philosophy, academics, beautiful notions. But I'm hungry, I'm not happy. Of course you're hungry. Of course you're not happy. If you wouldn't be so hungry, you'd be happy. So a person starts off life being idealistic, and all the hippies became yuppies. Why? Because they weren't happy. They said, here we were hippies and flower children, wearing paper bags and hanging out at Woodstock. And the marijuana wore off, and we weren't happy. And so you know what? We'd be happy if we had a white picket fence. We'd be happy if we drove a fancy car. We'd be happy if we had a thick bank account. If we had stocks and bonds. So they got stocks and bonds and a house, and they're unhappy now. And now they want to commit suicide. And they're committing suicide, Rahman al-Litzlan. This is the highest ever since records have been keeping. Never before in history have more people committed suicide. Successful people, happy people, supposedly. I guess they weren't so happy. What's wrong with Western civilization? Western civilization is prone to extremes because the Torah teaches and talks about balance. You need to have spirituality and you need to have materiality. If you have only ideals, you have nothing. An empty stomach is not going to make you happy. If you have only a full stomach and only material gluttony, you're also going to be unhappy because you're not a ban, you're not a behemoth. If you live like a behemoth, if you're a cow, you'll be happy. If you're a dog, you'll be happy. If you're a horse, you'll be happy. If you're a person who lives like a cow or a horse, you're not going to be happy. What does the cow need? Lots of hay and pasture and good weather and run and frolic around. And he can have some fun. And he's very happy. A happy bull. Happy bulls and cows. And you have people that live like bulls in china shops, that live like cows, that stuff their face with materialism, that want to have a good time and a good life, but there's no meaning to life. If you're a behemoth, but you're actually a human being, you're not going to be happy. If you're a ma, if you're a neshama, you're flying into the sky. You're an oila. You take leave of this world. And you're not going to be happy. Yitzchak and Rivka, do you know why we have this crazy shidduch unfolding? Because this crazy shidduch is the story of our life. It's a story of our Judaism. Do you know before we do a mitzvah, it says we're supposed to say L'shem yichud kutchabrichu v'shchinte. We're now about to perform the union of the presence of God and the Holy One, blessed be He. What the heck does that mean? The presence of God and the Holy One, blessed be He. Kutchabrichu, the Holy One, blessed He, and shchinte, in the Shechina. So the Kabbalists say, oh, what do you mean? That's masculine and feminine. There's a feminine energy of God and a masculine energy of God. What does that mean? It means that there's the what we call the creative energy, that kind, giving, unbridled stuff. That's the kutchabrichu. And then there's the shchinte. Shchinte is the discipline. We're going to be here. We're dwelling here now. This is my address. The Shekhinah comes down. It's actualizing godliness. A mitzvah brings together Shekhinah. Yichud kutchabrichu v'shchinte. There are some people who say this before they do every mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe teaches us, we say it before Baruch Shemer. The Rebbe explains, you say it once in the morning when you daven, and it goes for all your mitzvahs of the whole day. Do you know why Rabbi Acha said, Sichasen shel avdei aves is repeated twice in the Torah, but the mitzvahs are only alluded to in the Torah? Because the mitzvahs we do are the tiny, hidden examples of the great big paradigm. The paradigm is being told to us in the book of Genesis. Here's how the Mendel Rebbe puts it in a sefer called Teres Chaim. He says, I don't get this whole Genesis book. The whole Genesis book is a bunch of stories. Later on, I finally get to the beginning of Exodus, when we get to how to make a calendar, I finally get some mitzvahs. And he says, the book of Genesis is called Sefer HaYashar, the book of the just, the book of the upright. And it's the stories of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We hear a little bit of Adam and Chava in creation, then we go through a a whole bunch of genealogy, generation after generation, until we get to Noach. Noach is a story we need to hear about. It's the world gone awry, things gone wrong, and then generations, till we get to Parshas Lech Lecha. And that's the end of the stories of generations, except we get some Esau generations, we have to get through his genealogy. But the focus is on Avram, on Yitzchak, on Sarah, on Rivka, on Yaakov, on Rachel and Leah, on Yosef. These are the characters we focus on. So the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe says, the book is called Sefer HaYashar. That's what it's called. Genesis is called the book of Yashar. And what are mitzvahs called? Yesharim Darkei Hashem. The mitzvahs, that's the Darkei Hashem, that's the ways of God. He says the purpose of these stories is actually the blueprint of everything that will follow in the later generations. That's why we have the details. Comes to Avram, he spends a lot of time on this. Avram represents chesed, or right energy. Then we come to the story of Yitzchak. That's Gevurah, that's left energy. Then we come to Yaakov and Yosef. That's central energy, the Shvatim, the diffusion of all that. And he says, let me give you a mashal. Listen to this. Imagine a father would prepare for his child everything needed to put a building together. He made the plans. He got permission. He amassed all of the raw materials. Imagine a father would do that. What if I tell you there was a father who did it? It's a famous father who did it for his son. He spent years planning the building. His name was David. Who was the builder? Solomon. What was the real estate? What was the house? The Beis HaMikdash. He says exactly what David HaMelech did. Ukedavid shehechel l'shloima kol binyan Beis HaMikdash. Ein haben sarach rak livnei. Just build. Just put it together now. It's almost like a paint by number. I gave you the plans. I gave you the raw material. Let's put it together. Make it happen. Hakol yesh min hamuchan. In the book of Genesis, we have the ingredients for everything we need in life. Everything we could possibly need in life is already in Genesis. We just have to read it right. We just have to be able to develop it. We have to be able to unfold it. We have to be able to unfurl it. It's all there. And this is how Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had the Shvatim. This is how the patriarchs and matriarchs prepared the whole future for us. And that's why the Torah spends so much time on it. Because this is the what we call the blueprint. It's all in there. Later on, we can allude to the mitzvah. It's good enough. And the mitzvahs get done. But the mitzvahs getting done only if you look back at the good book and you find out, what's this all about? You want to know what this is all about? It's all about Yitzchak and Rivka. It's all about marrying idealism and pragmatism. And when idealism and pragmatism live together in the same body, they live in the same house, they live under the same roof, then they will beget happiness. Then they will be able to create future life. Then that is really what living is all about. And I'm pretty sure that if we could put this into action, and we can understand that this Shidduch and Yitzchak and Rivka is not just a paradigm of Shidduchim, it's not just a paradigm of mitzvahs, it's actually a paradigm of a happy life, then we'll find balance, and with balance will come the happiness, the fulfillment, and the satisfaction. And our greatest hope is that if we would only live balanced lives, lives in which we understand that we necessarily require both stuff and ideas. We require the idealism and the pragmatism. And one cannot live without the other ever. That bringing that together accelerates the process of universal redemption, which is really what the story of Yitzchak and Rivka all about. And that's how the Rebbe answered the question. He says, you know why Avram went for broke? Because Avram understood that this is what it's all about. He spent everything on this. Because this wasn't just a nice detail. This was everything. He went for broke because it was worth going for broke. He spent everything so that we could live a life as it's supposed to be lived, because that's what brings Mashiach and brings the whole story to its successful conclusion, hopefully, b'mheira u'b'yameinu, amen. Pretty cool?